Okay, Managerial Accounting Example 6B. We're going to continue this. If you've seen the last video, all I've done to change the spreadsheet, I've condensed it, taken out some blank lines, and added a little bit of coloring so we can kind of see these different things a little bit better. But we are continuing on understanding how different levels of production and sales and different costing methods affect net income. So what we've done is under absorption or full costing, absorption costing, we've noticed that in year one we have net income of $20,800, but under variable costing we only have $20,050. So we've got a $750 net income difference. And I'm not sure why these are coloring. All right, so that's what's going on. Why is that the case? Well, there are a couple different ways to think about this. One way we can think about it is, what's the difference between these two income statements is because the number of units we produced and the number of units we sold are not the same. If you look at our year one data, we produced 4,500 units, but we only sold 4,000 of them. And so 500 units are still in ending inventory. Now, if you go back to when we allocated overhead to products and job order costing, we allocated to production, not to sales. The number of units we produced, not the number of units we sold, were the ones that got cost allocated to them. So in other words, when we took this, going back up here, when we took the $66,750 of fixed overhead cost, and we allocated it to the 4,500 units, we allocated it to the 4,500 units we produced, which means that this $1.50 per unit, some of these units that got $1.50 allocated to them were sold and are part of cost of goods sold, and some of those units are part of ending inventory. So our ending inventory units, these 500 units of ending inventory, have $1.50 per unit allocated to them. We started the year with 0 units of inventory. We added 500 units worth of inventory with cost allocated. So one thing we can say is we have a change in inventory units, beginning inventory 0, ending inventory 500, so our increase is 500 units. So we produced 500 more units than we sold. Those units had $1.50 per unit allocated to them. Each unit we produced and stuck in ending inventory had $1.50 of cost. That's still sitting in our inventory, so it's still sitting in our inventory account on our balance sheet, and it's not sitting in our income statement in cost of goods sold. Only 4,000 units worth of fixed overhead costs are included in cost of goods sold, not 4,500. So we can think about this as cost deferred to ending inventory. $500 units, $1.50 per unit, $750. That's exactly the same thing as our difference in net operating income. We can do the same thing for year 2. What we'll notice is in year 2 we sold 4,700 units and produced only 45. So in other words, we sold more than we produced. So we produced 4,500 units. We sold 4,700 units. How did we sell more than we produced? Well, we pulled 200 units out of our beginning inventory. So we started the year 2 with 500 units. We ended the year with only 300 because we used we used more than we sold, so our inventory levels went down. So what happened? In the beginning of the year, we had 500 units of ending inventory. We ended the year with only 300 units of ending inventory. So our change in inventory levels was a 200 unit decrease. Each of those 200 units that we produced last year and sold this year brought $1.50 of overhead costs that we incurred last year onto this year's income statement. And so under full costing, our costs are actually higher because more cost that we incurred last year showed up on this year's income statement. So one way to think about the difference in income between full costing and variable costing is to think about the change in inventory units. And actually I should change this one thing. It's not a cost deferred into ending inventory. It becomes a cost released from beginning inventory. So this $300 is cost that we incurred last year in year one to produce units that we produced in year one but didn't sell into year two. So that's why it's released out of the end of year one, beginning of year two inventory into year two's income statement. So that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is how much fixed cost shows up on the income statement. That's another way we can answer the question. Well, if we look at our, I'll do the easy one first. We look at our variable costing income statement. How much fixed overhead costs, or I should say fixed manufacturing cost. How much fixed manufacturing cost shows up on our income statement? Let's take our easy one first, our variable costing income statement. We can say fixed production cost, $67.50 shows up. We see it split out here. That's how much it is. It's the same thing for both years. All of our fixed overhead, all of our fixed production cost shows up on the variable costing income statement because it's fixed. What about on our full costing income statement? How many units did we sell? 4,000 in year one, 4,700 in year two. What's our fixed manufacturing cost per unit? In year one and year two, our fixed cost per unit is $1.50. So our total fixed cost on, total fixed manufacturing cost on income statement is the product of those two. $6,000, 4,000 units times $1.50 per unit. And here it's $7,050. So what this says is our variable costing income statement is going to show our full fixed cost of $67.50. But our absorption costing only shows the manufacturing cost associated with those 4,000 units sold. So that's our difference of $750, which is the same as our difference here. In year two, excuse me, our variable costing income statement shows the full fixed overhead cost of $67.50. Our full costing income statement shows 4,700 units sold, and it has the fixed cost of $1.50 per unit on those units sold. So it has $7,050. So there's more overhead on the full costing income statement than on the variable costing income statement. Why does this matter? What are we doing here? Why are we spending all this time counting fixed overhead? Well, if you're a manager of a profit center, you probably have the ability to influence both the number of units sold and the number of units produced. Notice in year one, more units are produced than are sold. Let's say it's coming near the end of year one and you're trying to sell as many as you can, but you realize you're not going to sell as many as you want and your year-end bonus isn't going to be very good. And so maybe what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to produce extra units. Now, I'm not recommending you do this, but you'll have a temptation to do this. If you produce extra units, what you can do is you can take some of this year's overhead cost and defer it into ending inventory, keep that cost off of your income statement and make your income higher. Notice in year one, when we produced more than we sold, our full costing income was higher than our variable costing income, which means our full costing income has been increased by producing more units than we sold. Now, you can play that game for 1 year, but next year when things roll around again and you can't sell more than you produce, then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to be tempted to keep producing more than you sell, because what happens in year two when we produce less than we sell? If you try to bring your inventory levels back down to where they ought to be, what's going to happen is you're going to release cost off of your balance sheet onto your income statement. It's going to make your net income go down in a full costing approach. So, if you're being evaluated on a full costing approach, you will be very tempted to produce more than you're going to sell year after year after year, or at least not produce less. And so that will make sure that you don't have your income sort of artificially decreased, but it'll mean you're artificially increasing your income. So if you're going to evaluate profit centers, you take away that manipulation by using variable costing. Variable costing, producing more or less than you sell, does not in any way increase or decrease net operating income, so there's no manipulation available. So my advice would be, if you're evaluating profit center managers in a production setting, for internal purposes, you want to try to use variable costing, which takes away the ability of managers to store this year's fixed production costs into next year's or into the ending inventory and keep them off the income statement.